Steve Kim back once again for UCN Live. I'm here with Larry Merchant talking all things boxing. Larry, there's a kid that I'm very high on from Omaha, Nebraska, and I think you're high on him too. He just recently blew out Hank Lundy. Terrence Crawford, the last three opponents, Lundy, Dierizon, and Tomas Delorme. Not exactly lethal weapon 3, but as you like to say, does he pass your eye test?
He does, and he has for a couple of years. I called a couple of his fights. He is a superior boxer puncher, which to me is the top of the game and how it's practiced. And the question is, when does his promoter, Top Rank, move him in against the best opponents? Because right now, even though he has a base of support in Omaha, it's not national, and he's just got to go out there and keep fighting. People forget that even though Floyd Mayweather sprang from the womb into a fighting culture as a child around his father and his uncles, and was a phenomenon when he was a kid fighter. He went through some hard times, and had to travel around the country to fight, and you just have to keep going. And there are opponents out there for him. The kid Vargas, who just fought,
Jesse Vargas,
and had a good fight, and Postal, and
Provodnikov.
I mean, those are real fights that I'd want to see him in, and then eventually the break will come.
And Larry, speaking of Floyd Mayweather, the traveling road show you were in Fresno, you were in Miami, you were in San Francisco, so it is a process. Larry, we spoke about this a week ago, a day after Frampton Quigg, and what was another letdown. Is it just me, Larry? Am I becoming that old guy where everything was better 10, 15 years ago? Why are today's supposed big fights such a letdown?
I don't have any universal theories about that. That fight between two unbeaten British kids and long anticipated over there was a letdown. But we have selective memories going back. There were more fights, so perhaps there were more big, fights that became indelible kinds of dramas in our minds. But there were plenty of bad fights in the old days.
But don't you think that more or less when we had an expectation with Hearns, Leonard, Hagler, Duran, and later on Barrera, Morales, Marquez, Pacquiao, didn't those fights at least have a higher batting average?
I wasn't keeping the batting average, but there were. It always seemed that there was a hell of a big fight that had just happened within living memory, and now another one was we were anticipating. And one thing led to another, and that was because they wanted to fight each other because that's where the money was. And in today's economic model, with so many promoters and so many and such globalization, everybody is positioning themselves with their own promoters in their own countries to maximize and to take as little risk as possible. And then when they get in there, maybe they are also taking as little risk as possible. Maybe that's the tune that's been played for them so much that they start to believe that that's the way that the game should go.
Larry, how stunned were you that when Klitschko got outboxed by Tyson Fury, do you think he turned old overnight? And do you also think that his loss, on the flip side, is the best thing to happen to this division, given the fact there are some new names like Louis Ortiz, Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, and Anthony Joshua?
I think there's an expectant atmosphere about the heavyweight division to see who's going to emerge. Klitschko has or did fight an awful lot of fights, and he ran into a bigger, younger, hungrier guy, just as Cotto did when he fought Canelo, and as others we've seen. And maybe in his late 30s, maybe he's just not as hungry as he was, didn't prepare as diligently, might have had some personal issues. He had just had a child. His wife had gone on television saying how she had postpartum depression.
Right.
We don't know where all that plays into anything, or whether Fury is just an unusual specimen,
Right.
and has to be just given his due for pulling it off. A lot of guys tried.
Larry, going all the way to the other end of the spectrum, to the little guys, your thoughts on Chocolatito Roman Gonzalez?
Well, I like him. He's obviously a five-tool guy, if there is such a guy.
Okay. High praise.
in prize fighting, but the American audience is not necessarily all that interested in little guys who are just dominant.
Do you think that's his ceiling, that he's like the Robin to the Batman of Golovkin? He'll always be the guy that's a very good co-feature, but can't necessarily be the headliner on big cards. Is that the ceiling in America?
It might be, which doesn't mean that if HBO has a night and open and they want to put on one of their lesser shows, that they don't put him on top of the card and put a good fight underneath him. But can you become a star in America? It's unlikely, but then how likely was Manny Pacquiao?
Yes, that's very true. Larry, speaking of stars, Oscar De La Hoya went through a lot personally the last 2-3 years. Last year at this point, I think people were actually worried about the health and status of Golden Boy Promotions. I think they've actually steadied himself. How impressed have you been by his personal and professional comeback?
Well, certainly is the fact that he's all in personally, and that he's all over the place and really trying to do the job of a promoter. Maybe he needed some time between the last fight and then getting into his personal life, and then finding a playing field where he felt comfortable on. But hey, it's good for boxing. He's got Canelo, he's got Ortiz, and that gives him some breathing room to try to develop other primetime fighters.
Okay. Well, that's part 2 with Larry Merchant. We come back with more.